What if the reason you're suddenly pulled aside at airport customs has nothing to do with what's in your bag, but everything to do with something tiny you did without even realizing it? You walk off the plane feeling confident, maybe tired, maybe excited, passport in hand, thinking the hardest part of international travel is already over. But customs is where trips silently fall apart for thousands of travelers every single day. And as a professional travel planner, airport hacks expert, and former airport security consultant, let me tell you something most people don't want to hear. Customs officers are not just checking documents. They are reading you. Your tone, your timing, your micro-reactions, your hesitation, your story, and even the way you stand in line. And the biggest mistake travelers make is believing that only criminals get flagged. Because the truth is, the red flags that trigger intense scrutiny are often innocent, accidental, and painfully human, like oversharing when no one asked. Or answering too fast because you rehearsed your answers on the plane. Or worse, answering too slow because you're trying to sound honest. And yes, officers notice both. Because from a security standpoint, extremes are suspicious. And one of the most common red flags is inconsistency. Not lies, but tiny mismatches between what you say, what your documents say, and what your body language suggests. Like when your arrival card says vacation, but you keep talking about meetings, or your hotel address is correct, but you can't pronounce the city naturally. Or you say you're visiting a friend, yet you hesitate when asked how you met them. And none of this means you're doing anything illegal, but customs doesn't work on guilt. It works on probability, patterns, and risk reduction. And another major red flag is treating customs like customer service, smiling too much, cracking jokes, calling the officer bro or sir repeatedly, because friendliness in that environment can feel forced. And forced behavior triggers curiosity, not comfort, while the opposite mistake is acting cold, defensive, or annoyed, crossing your arms, sighing loudly, rolling your eyes at routine questions. Because irritation suggests entitlement or fear, and fear is what security chases. And here's something travelers almost never realize. The line itself is part of the screening. Officers and cameras observe how you behave before you reach the counter. Who uses their phone until the last second? Who fumbles for documents? Who watches other travelers intensely? Who suddenly changes posture when they see an officer glance their way? And yes, that matters, because preparedness without panic is the goal. And panic looks like rushing, sweating, over-explaining, or repeatedly checking your passport as if it might change. And let's talk about declarations, because this is where well-meaning travelers sabotage themselves the most, checking no without reading, or checking yes, and then minimizing verbally. Saying things like just a little or nothing important, which immediately raises alarms. Because from a customs perspective, people who minimize are people who hide. And even innocent items like food, gifts, or medication can become red flags if your explanation sounds casual instead of clear. And clarity is currency at customs. Not charm, not confidence, clarity. And another mistake is volunteering extra information that opens doors to questions that didn't need to exist. Like explaining your entire itinerary when asked only your destination, or talking about your job in detail when asked the purpose of your trip. Because every extra sentence is a thread an officer can pull, and their job is to pull threads. Not to reassure you, and body language is huge. Not the dramatic stuff people think, but subtle things, touching your face when answering, shifting weight repeatedly, tapping your foot, holding your breath before responding, and even nodding while saying no, which happens more than you think. And from a security training standpoint, clusters of behaviors matter more than single actions. So one nervous movement is human, but a pattern becomes a red flag. And then there's the issue of documents. Not having them ready isn't always the problem. It's how you handle them, dropping papers, handing the wrong document first, flipping through pages frantically, or gripping your passport too tightly, because confidence looks calm, not perfect. And one of the biggest unseen red flags is mismatched travel profiles. Like traveling extremely light for a long trip, or extremely heavy for a short one. Or carrying business equipment on a vacation, or having no checked luggage at all on a multi-week stay. Because customs doesn't judge you, it compares you to millions of past travelers. And when your pattern doesn't fit, you get a second look. And here's something no one talks about on YouTube: timing. Arriving very early or very late can both raise interest depending on the airport. Because certain flights are historically higher risk, and officers know exactly which ones. And even your seat location on the plane can factor into secondary screening probabilities. Because patterns exist whether travelers like it or not. And another critical red flag is rehearsed honesty. When answers sound memorized instead of lived, when you say your hotel name too quickly but struggle with basic follow-ups, or when your story doesn't breathe naturally, because truth usually has pauses, imperfections, and natural recall. While rehearsed answers sound clean, sharp, and strangely emotionless. And let's talk about technology. Because phones are silent witnesses, clearing messages midline. Deleting photos, logging out of accounts, or nervously checking notifications can trigger interest. Not because officers assume guilt, but because behavior shifts suggest concealment. And in many countries, customs has broad authority at entry points, which surprises travelers who assume rights work the same everywhere. And arguing about rights at customs is one of the fastest ways to escalate a routine check into a full inspection. Because cooperation is interpreted as low risk, resistance as unknown risk, and unknown is expensive for security. And here's a subtle but powerful red flag: correcting the officer too quickly, interrupting questions, or finishing their sentences. Because it shifts control, and customs interviews are about control, not conversation, and even tone matters: sarcasm, humor that doesn't land, or joking about security topics, which some travelers still do, is almost guaranteed to buy you extra time in a secondary room. And yes, attire can matter too. Not fashion, but appropriateness. Wearing heavy layers in warm climates. Or clothing that doesn't match the stated purpose of travel, because again, patterns. And one of the most misunderstood red flags is nervous laughter, which many people use unconsciously. But in security psychology, laughter under stress is flagged as displacement behavior, not friendliness. And then there's the mistake of lying just a little, thinking a small lie is harmless. But small lies are actually easier to detect because they're unnecessary. An unnecessary deception is a major indicator in risk assessment models, and once an officer senses deception, the interaction fundamentally changes, even if nothing illegal exists. And travelers also forget that customs officers communicate with each other constantly. So being difficult with one doesn't reset your profile at the next counter. And here's something that shocks people. Being overly knowledgeable about customs rules can raise eyebrows. Because average travelers don't quote regulations, and when someone does, it suggests prior issues or research motivated by anxiety. And anxiety is not a crime, but it is a variable. And the final red flag most people never see coming is entitlement. Saying things like, "I travel all the time," or "I've never been asked this before." Because frequency doesn't reduce scrutiny. It sometimes increases it, and entitlement suggests resistance to process. And security processes depend on compliance, not comfort, and all of this might sound overwhelming. But here's the reality professionals know: customs isn't trying to catch you doing something wrong. It's trying to decide how much attention you deserve. And attention is allocated based on signals, not morality. And the travelers who pass through smoothly aren't the most confident or the most charming. They're the most consistent, calm, clear, and appropriately brief. And if you want to avoid unnecessary delays, secondary screening, or that sinking feeling when your passport disappears behind a glass wall, the smartest suggestions are simple but powerful. Prepare your answers but don't rehearse them. Carry documents neatly and access them calmly. Answer only what's asked and stop. Keep your body still and your tone neutral. Declare honestly and clearly without minimizing. Avoid jokes. Avoid arguments. And remember that at customs, less emotion is more trust. So travel like someone with nothing to prove, nothing to hide, and nothing to rush. Because confidence at entry isn't loud, It's quiet, steady, and boring. And that boring traveler is the one who walks straight out into the arrivals hall while everyone else wonders what they did wrong.